Today, I'm dropping all of the realizations that I've had in my own experiences with rehabbing from injuries and my pre and postnatal training. And most importantly, how I see hella gaps in traditional training programs for strength and hypertrophy based on those experiences. My name is Annie Miller, Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and I help you learn as you train and enjoy your lifts again. This one goes out to coaches and trainees alike. You do not need to be injured or with child in order to benefit from this video, and that is my point. So many things we learn in injury rehab as well as pre and postnatal training can be applied to higher quality, more well-rounded general strength and hypertrophy training. I will start by referencing programs that I followed in order to come to these realizations. This is why I think it's so valuable to hire other coaches or at very least follow programs that you didn't write yourself. And I will be the first to say that I am very partial to my own program design. I truly enjoy it, but even if I change a few things about a program that I'm following, being exposed to other exercise selections, set and rep schemes, training splits, etc. is so valuable. I am taking little nuggets that I've learned from others and passing them on to you. Any type of training has gaps. No one program can actually do it all. So take from this what sticks out to you about your own training or perhaps your programming for your own clients. This is for general weightlifting with a nod towards strength as the main focus. So let the gaps begin. First up is internal rotation. Holy shit, something I'd apparently never done until prepping to give birth was internal rotation, specifically in my lower body. I followed the Mama Stay Fit pre and postnatal programming. I'll put that in the description below. My glutes were so tight when I started loading them in an internally rotated position. When we internally rotate at the hip with or without knee flexion, the glutes are lengthened. Not only is this functional, something that we should be able to do, it's also great for recruiting new muscle fibers and creating potential for more growth. It's really a win-win. Internal rotation is so easy to add into your training. If you're already doing split squats, lunges, or unilateral RDL variations, aka most people lifting weights, simply rotate your torso towards the inner thigh. Think belly button or sternum towards the working leg. The rotation will happen as you lower into the movement examples that I shared with you. Perhaps more commonly, a curtsy lunge, split squat, or step up does this without that torso rotation. My point is, if any femur rotation is happening in traditional strength or hypertrophy training, it's likely external rotation. Adding in a bit of internal rotation is something to consider. Next up is adduction. Let's keep going with the lower body and the hips. With all of the glute work we see in weightlifting, there's no shortage of abduction. Abduction or abduction in this context is the leg moving away from the midline. Therefore, adduction is the opposite. The glutes, primarily glute medius and part of glute max, are going to be responsible for abduction. You've seen it, you've done it a lot, I am sure. Lateral band walks of all kinds, side-lying leg raises, cable kickbacks, or leg lift variations. That is all the abduction. So we must ask, where is the love for adduction? Is it the thigh gap? Is that why we don't train our inner thighs? The adductors get no love in traditional strength and hypertrophy training. That stops today. You want to smash a freaking watermelon between your knees? Adduction is the name of the game. Adduction became a focus for me in 2 different seasons. 1, recovering from an SI joint and lumbar spine injury, and 2, in my pre and postnatal training. The adductors are important, particularly for pelvic stability. It is easy to see how neglecting adduction and overtraining abduction might create imbalances in the control of the pelvis. Adductors are an area many people will say is tight. This may be true, but tight doesn't inherently mean short. It could be, or they could be weak and also tight. Training the adductors can be done in many different ways. Some common ones are the Copenhagen plank in many different variations. The contractions can be isometric or active. Using sliders for lateral lunges is brutal for the adductors. Any inward sliding can be highly effective for working the adductors. Then of course, there's the machine at the gym. You know the one you would never dare make eye contact with anyone while using. That is great for the adductors. Cossack squats or wide stance squats or deadlift variations will also call upon the adductors in a less isolated manner. If you spend a fair amount of time opening those leggies, maybe think about closing them as well. God, you guys are gonna hate. You're gonna get up in arms about the next one. Maybe not, but I presume that you probably will. High pulls or the upright row. But Annie, those cause shoulder impingement. I know, I am the first to say I used to claim this as well. I went from doing these regularly in my bro split days to claiming that they are the spawn of Satan and will inherently give you shoulder impingement. But the fact is, they don't cause shoulder impingement. Not inherently, at least. They're a vertical pull, opposite of a more traditional vertical pull like a lat pull down. Hear me out, you don't have to do these, but if shoulder impingement is the reason that you're avoiding them, please reconsider. Deadlifts can be an exercise where people experience back pain. That does not mean deadlifts cause back pain. Exceeding capacity causes pain. Introducing a load that's too heavy for a given trained pattern may cause injury. How that injury manifests depends on the joints and the muscles at work. Is that fair? I think so. The upright row targets the traps and the shoulders, specifically your medial and anterior delts, so side and front, and your traps. They also require your shoulder blade to move and glide over the rib cage. Where people may get into trouble is the posture of this exercise, letting the shoulder and the scapula protract and drop forward with excessive internal rotation at the shoulder. You may see the shoulder blade flare off of the rib cage or the elbow raise forward. Your elbow height is not your focus here. I am not positive, but think this could be part of the issue, thinking about getting the elbow as high as possible in the movement. Your elbow may not actually raise much higher than your shoulder. Regardless, think about the shoulder blade being pulled onto the rib cage on the back, keeping a big chest, elbow moving along a slightly backward trajectory. The scapula will rotate up and slightly outward at the bottom. Take it or leave it. Load it properly or don't, but I do encourage you to give the upward row a try. Possibly most popular is moving the spine and the shoulder blades. This is obviously very broad on the surface. Often the fitness industry likes to settle into extremes, no spinal flexion, pack the shoulders into your back pockets and never let them out. If you missed my video on how neutral spine did me wrong, be sure to check it out. I used to be what I refer to as a movement elitist. Please know that I am preaching from the trenches on this. I am not on the mountaintop yelling at you. The take home here is that we should be able to find and keep a neutral spine. We should be able to retract and depress our shoulder blades and hold them there without breaking position. And creating constant rigidity is not ideal. It creates a different issue than a complete lack of control, but it's still a problem nonetheless. Is a better goal maybe to be able to control our spine and our shoulder blade under greater ranges of motion and loads? I think yes. Let that shoulder unpack, reach up in your lat pull down, and then downwardly rotate that shoulder blade as your lat contracts along a larger range. Maybe implement some spinal cars, some segmenting of the spine unloaded, progress to an unweighted Jefferson curl if that is safe to do for you, and then add load. Can your spine laterally flex, or does it feel like your obliques are going to rip straight off of your rib cage when you reach overhead to the side? The spine should move. That statement doesn't mean that pulling a deadlift like a scaredy cat is most ideal for most people. Please do not take that out of context. Any movement should always be progressed from unloaded mobility to loaded mobility, and there are still biomechanically advantageous positions for moving weight, meaning the most efficient and effective position for moving most loads is with the joints stacked and without energy leaks. I digress. If you believe a rigid spine is the way, I challenge that. Consider spine and scapular mobility and control and how that can be implemented into strength and hypertrophy training. Have you ever worked on spinal mobility or gone through a season of extreme focus on keeping the spine or shoulder blade from moving? I certainly have. Let me know in the comments below. Next up is tibialis anterior work. We'll keep this one pretty quick. Most people tend to lack adequate ankle dorsiflexion, how far your knee can go over your toe with your whole foot staying on the floor. A big ol' missing piece in a lot of programs and even rehab for ankle injuries is tibialis anterior work. Oh, show muscle man. One moment, not a bad idea. This is your tibialis anterior. Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy, is definitely changing the lack of tibialis anterior on what I think is a global level. We often see eccentric ankle dorsiflexion and distraction work at the ankle. People work their calves. Both the soleus and the gastroc like abduction and adduction and internal rotation versus external rotation from earlier. What about working the opposite of the calves? On a broad scale, most hypertrophy training does a decent job of working opposing muscle groups. It falls short in a few places. I have found tibialis anterior is one of those. Ever look at soccer players' lower leg? They have the juiciest tibialis anterior just popping off of their shin bone. It is lovely. It's one of my favorite muscles in the body, and that is due to all of their active ankle dorsiflexion. You can do something as simple as tibialis taps or tib pulls with bands. We just got this piece of equipment, which only works bilaterally. It's fine, but I like to use single leg tib taps or eccentric focused band work for a unilateral option. Don't neglect the tibialis anterior and actively working that ankle dorsiflexion. That is all I've got. Those are the gaps that I've personally discovered in traditional strength and hypertrophy training due to injury rehab and pre and postnatal training. Not saying all hypertrophy and strength training programs ever created neglect these areas, just that after a decade plus in the industry, these are areas that I'd consider adding into or not forgetting about in your training. I reserve the right to change my mind as usual. I will catch you guys in the next one.